All right, for more on the Nylander extension, here's our hockey insider Pierre LeBrun. And William Nylander and Brad Treliving have both said there was never a time when they did not think that they would come to an agreement on a contract. But as your colleague Chris Johnston pointed out on Twitter, or X, on Monday, this was like a 7-month negotiation. So why did it get done on Monday, Pierre?
Yeah, well, it was a grind of a negotiation. I mean, I think in the aftermath of finally getting this monster deal done, both sides want to be positive about the way they look back on it. The reality is that it actually had a bit of a rocky start. I mean, the two sides met and exchanged their initial positions at the June draft in late June in Nashville, Jay, and it was not good. The two sides had a pretty sizable gap. We reported on it at the time on Insider Trading at the draft. So much going on, but people may forget that. But it was not a great start to that negotiation. The two sides were anywhere from $2.5 to $3 million apart in their initial positions. The Leafs were somewhere in the 8s per year, and Nylander's camp was somewhere between 10 and 11 a year. And yeah, that was a tough way to get going. However, and this is where I do think both sides are saying the truth, is that they really kept at this. And especially once Nylander was back here for training camp in September, there was an ongoing dialogue between the Leafs front office and Nylander's camp led by agent Louis Gross throughout, right from the start of the year. So that is pretty genuine, I think, when both sides say they were pretty determined to get that done. That is true, and ultimately they did.
And Pierre, there are half the people saying, well, how could William Nylander have a contract with an average annual value more than David Pastrnak? But then there's another half of the people saying, well, wait, he's a top 5 scorer in the league this season, and $11.5 million is what top 5 scorers of the league should make. Why were the Leafs comfortable with that 11.5 number?
Yeah, and the other thing, Jay, is the third point, which is maybe the most important one, which is it's about the percentage of the cap. And once Gary Bettman announced exactly a month ago in Seattle at the Board of Governors meeting, Jay, that the cap was going to go up north of $4 million to about $87.7 million next year, that really emboldened Nylander's camp to say, percentage of the cap, this is what the conversation's about. And so, yes, while William Nylander ends up making more money in his new deal than his pal David Pastrnak in Boston, David Pastrnak in Boston, when he negotiated his deal a year ago, still ends up with a bigger percentage of the cap at the time than Nylander will have starting next year. Percentage of the cap, that's what matters here in these big negotiations. Nylander's percentage of the cap is actually less than Pastrnak. It's less than Artemi Panarin in New York. It's even less than when Mitch Marner signed his last deal, by the way. That's what counts in these conversations. And number two, bottom line is here, yes, the Leafs probably could have got him a little cheaper last summer, Jay.
Yeah.
Probably could have got him somewhere between 10 and 11 million a year. But you can't criticize the Leafs for not knowing 100% that he was going to jump from being an 87-point player last season to right now being on pace for 120 points. That's a massive jump. And, good on William Nylander. He bet on himself, and he's getting paid the ceiling of that marketplace.
Boy, is he ever. You bring up percentage of the cap. So starting next season, the Leafs would have 4 players making more than $10 million on the cap. In fact, they'd have, if you include Morgan Riley, 5 players making almost $55 million, and the cap expected to go up to about $87.7 million, somewhere in there. So about 5 players making about 61% of your cap. How do the Leafs ice the team with about $30 million to spend on everybody else?
You're better at math than me, but yes, that is an issue for next season. It's certainly on paper a 12-month issue, right? I mean, John Tavares has 1 more year on his deal at $11 million. And if John Tavares is going to retire a Leaf, and he's been a great captain for them, he's obviously coming back at a much bigger discount than that. But for 1 year, it is an issue. There's a number of things to look at here. One is, what is the future of Mitch Marner? I mean, I don't want to start something here because I think Mitch Marner wants to be a Leaf for life, but he's 1 year away from his deal expiring this summer. Obviously, the Leafs are going to want to talk to him about an extension. Let's see where that goes. I mean, if that doesn't go well, is there a trade? And Mitch Marner controls his fate, by the way, with a full no-move clause. But I'm just saying that's an example of where the whole cap situation could change depending on Marner's future. Number two, I mean, that's why some of these one-year deals that Brad Treliving signed last summer were smart, term-wise. The Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi, like some of these one-year deals where you're not backing yourself into a corner cap-wise past this year, right? Because you kind of knew what was coming in terms of Austin Matthews' extension and hopefully William Nylander. So, listen, it's going to be a cap headache, but it's been a cap headache for the Leafs every year now for a long time.
Yeah, and, well, for pretty much every team, too. So at least they've got company. The Leafs hosting the Sharks on Tuesday. You can watch the game right here on TSN in the Leafs region. But Pierre's not done with us yet. He's going to stick around. He's been very kind to stick around. We're going to talk about this fascinating Philadelphia-Anaheim deal involving Cutter Gauthier. That's later on this edition of SportsCenter.